I am a huge fan of Deltarune. I watched playthroughs of it day one, and I have been invested with the story and obsessed with every single line of dialogue since 2018. I was 11 years old when Deltarune Chapter 1 released, and now I am an adult. Deltarune has been a part of my life for so long now that I feel like if anyone were going to write a somewhat critical video on it, it would have to be me. Now, that's not to say I don't like chapters 3 and 4, which were released earlier this year in June. I actually loved them, far surpassing the highs of chapters 1 and 2. However, there are a few issues with these chapters that even on my first playthrough, before I even began to look into the ways of accessing the secret bosses or the eggs, that I was confused by. These issues are not a serious scuff on the game, but they are rather confusing for me, so let's just dive right in. But first, a word from our sponsors. I will never say the soundtrack of Deltarune is lacking. Toby Fox is a musical genius, and to suggest for a moment that chapters 3 and 4 have bad music would be foolish, but I do honestly think that the soundtrack of the latter chapters is a downgrade. Chapter 3 especially has a soundtrack that sort of feels confused with itself. It feels like there was meant to be more music and more content in Chapter 3, supported by the unused content in the files and Toby himself saying that there were pacing issues with Chapter 3. Chapter 3's soundtrack, while having some of the highest highs, Mike the Board Please, Raise Up Your Bat, TV World, It's TV Time, and Black Knife, also has some of the lowest lows, Vapor Buster and Rooter Buster being especially offensive, both being remixes of the basic battle theme Rude Buster. Vapor Buster is slightly more acceptable, because I assume it was only meant to unnerve the player slightly, but Rooter Buster is just weird. It plays during the boss against La Nina and El Nina, and in my opinion doesn't really fit the characters. Chapter 4's music is more consistently really great, but it suffers from a lot of its music feeling really samey. But honestly, I can deal with it because this chapter gives us amazing songs like A Dark Zone, Ever Higher, and The Place Where It Rained, the last of which gave me goosebumps when I first heard it. My main issue with the soundtrack is when it comes to how some songs are used, or where they are placed. My first issue came in Chapter 3. In Chapter 2, when you're fighting through Queen's Mansion, the music of the area continues playing during battles in the castle. In TV World, this should have 100% been the case, but rather, Rude Buster plays during battles in TV World. It interrupts the flow and just feels slightly off. I'm gonna say it. Burning Eyes or Black Knife should have had the Freedom motif. Whether you consider Eram or the Knight to be the true secret boss of Chapter 3, I don't really care. All I know is that the Freedom motif is entirely absent from Chapter 3. Forget the fact that Chapter 3 has a completely untraditional secret boss, just give me the motif. I personally think that Burning Eyes should have had it. It just feels so weird to have it gone, especially with how it's used in Chapter 4. In Chapter 1 and 2, the secret bosses were both people corrupted by the power of the Shadow Crystals and the idea of freedom, therefore given the motif. In Chapter 3, Ram is set up to be the secret boss, even if it's painfully obvious that it's a red herring by the way they speak. I am fine with the twist that they aren't a secret boss. I just think it's weird that the tradition of Chapter 1 and 2 was broken, and that we didn't get the motif anywhere in the chapter. Chapter 4 is even weirder. Gerson never used the Shadow Crystal, and that is usually used as the explanation to why his version of the Freedom motif is so weird. I'm gonna be straight up, I didn't even notice the Freedom motif on my first listen of the song. Going back, I can't not hear it, but the fact that I missed it once is still really strange. Do you want to know where in Chapter 4 the Freedom motif actually appears in all its glory? Well, it's not in the other secret boss of Chapter 4, that being Mike, or the Mikes. It's in a mini-game that you can play after beating the Mikes. What? I really, really hope that there will be some explanation for this later, but for now, it's just insanely confusing. That's all my issues with the music. Let me be clear. I love the ERAM fight, I love the Knight fight, I love the Mike fight, and I love the Gerson fight. I think it's super neat that chapters 3 and 4 essentially have 2 secret bosses each. I have nothing but nitpicks. Needing to S rank on both boards to get the ERAM fight is kind of annoying when there's no way to easily go back without messing with save files. Chapter 3's bosses have no soul gimmick like Spamped and Neo's gimmick, unless you count the ERAM fight being a different game essentially. I don't really like that some of the Knight's attacks arbitrarily do significantly more damage. That attack where the swords circle you while the others shoot at you does an insane amount of damage for some reason. The Mike fight has no freedom motif. Maybe it shouldn't, but the minigame definitely shouldn't. The Mike fight leans a little too hard into being a joke about Mike theories. I'm totally good with there being 3 fake Mikes because nobody can figure out who Mike really is, but the whole cowboy and cat thing, and especially the theory board that the Pippins pulls out, just feels slightly insulting. And then the real microphone thing at the end is so confusing. Gerson's fight executes the shield and arrow gimmick way better than Undyne's fight in Undertale, however the fight is too easy. It took me 3 tries. That's all my issues with the secret bosses. Next up is the... In Chapter 1, 2, and 4, the egg is gotten in a consistent way. Walk back and forth between 2 rooms repeatedly, and eventually you'll end up in a room between. In Chapter 3, getting the egg is especially difficult, however. It involves placing a block in a specific place on a screen, in a game, in a random area, and then later getting caught in a stealth area to teleport to an otherwise inaccessible area, where you move that block from before, get some cryptic dialogue, and eventually get a ticket. With this ticket, you can go to a seemingly random enemy in a completely different area of the game, and then hold left while hovering over an act. Then, and only then, are you taken to this chapter's egg room, which is more of an egg area? Maybe there's some lore explanation to why this chapter is so different from the others in this regard, but if there is, I don't think anybody knows it. My best guess is that it has something to do with this dark world being Chris's dark world, but I can't say for certain. I think the only reason I have such an issue with this is because it means both of the major secrets in Chapter 3, that being the secret boss and the egg, are significantly different than the previous 2. I don't have an issue with shaking things up, but this is just a bit too much for me. This is a super duper minor one, but I think that Chapter 4 is too easy. The enemies don't feel particularly hard, and a lot of battles feel really one-off. Like I said before, the Gerson fight is way too easy for me, and the Titan boss is just way too easy. I beat it first try and only used like 1 healing item. This could be that I'm good at the game because I've been playing it since 2018, but genuinely Chapter 4 is just not hard at all. I have one last thing, and I don't know if I'm just reading into outside sources too much, but it's an issue nonetheless. Toby wrote the majority of Deltarune's complete story after the creation of Chapter 1. Before then, it seems like he only had a general idea of where he wanted things to go. Unfortunately, now the story feels like it's trying to do its own thing while also being constrained to what was put into Chapter 1. It's really hard to describe, and the story is not bad by any means. I am insanely invested in every little thing that happens, but the story overall just feels slightly confused. I feel like when Chapter 2 came out, Chapter 1 could have gotten some sort of update. Perhaps changing a few lines of dialogue or something just to better fit the slightly changed direction of the story. Now, after Chapters 3 and 4 have come out, I feel especially like Chapter 1 needs a graphical update. Some things can be changed ever so slightly just to fit in with comparing the other chapters side by side. That's all I got. Again, I love these chapters so much, and Deltarune remains as one of my favorite games, period. Even with only half the game out. If you want to see a video focusing on the positives, or even just my theories on the new chapters, I'd be more than willing to make one if this video does well. Thank you for watching, thank you to my patrons, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!